Marcus Ellison's eyes opened before dawn, as they had every day for the past 20 years. The quiet hum of early morning filled the room, mingling with the soft breathing of his wife, Tasha, and the faint coos of their newborn daughter, Amira, in the crib nearby. The discipline of a lifetime pushed him upward from the bed, every muscle engaged, every sense alert, even here in the sanctuary of his home. He moved through his morning routine with military precision, stretching, breathing exercises, a cold shower that sharpened the edges of his mind. The smell of brewed coffee beckoned from the kitchen, where Tasha was already preparing breakfast, a small smile greeting him as he stepped in. "Morning," she said softly, handing him a steaming cup. "Morning," Marcus replied, his tone steady, the soldier's calm still beneath the civilian surface. The house was quiet but full of the soft sounds of a family adjusting to new rhythms, a baby's cries and laughter, the shuffle of shoes on hardwood floors. Marcus was a man forged in the crucible of combat, a Delta Force commander who had seen the worst of the world's chaos. Now, those battles lived mostly in his mind, the constant readiness, the vigilance, the weight of command. Yet here, in this peaceful suburban neighborhood, those instincts felt both necessary and out of place. He sat at the kitchen table, watching his children play in the next room, their laughter a balm and a reminder of what he fought for beyond the battlefield. After breakfast, Marcus donned his running gear and stepped outside, the cool morning air filling his lungs. The streets were calm, neighbors tending gardens, the distant hum of lawnmowers and children's play filling the air. His feet struck the pavement in a steady rhythm, the discipline of training guiding every step. As he ran, his mind drifted to the latest briefings and news, rumors of unrest, the shifting political landscape, and the quiet presence of the National Guard trucks he'd noticed parked a few blocks away. At first, it seemed routine, a precautionary measure. But the tight formation of guardsmen, the hum of generators, and the curt efficiency of their movements stirred something deep in Marcus's warrior's heart. He slowed his pace, eyes narrowing. Military discipline taught him to read signs, subtle shifts in posture, the weight of a soldier's pack, the way weapons were secured. He finished his run with a final burst of speed, then made his way back home. Inside, Tasha was folding laundry, her calm presence grounding him. He paused by the doorway, watching her, then moved to pick up Amira, holding his daughter close. "We'll face whatever comes," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. The day stretched ahead, normal, peaceful, but threaded with an undercurrent of unease. Marcus knew that even at home, the soldier's watch never truly ended. The early morning sun cast long shadows over the perimeter fence of the government compound. The National Guard was on high alert, every detail scrutinized, every movement observed. Rumors of potential threats had been circulating for weeks, and the slightest hint of suspicious activity set nerves on edge. Marcus Carter stepped out of his car, adjusting his coat as he walked briskly toward the nearby coffee shop. It was his routine, a quick stop before heading to the office. He had no idea that today, his familiar presence would be met with suspicion. Unbeknownst to him, a tip had come into the guard's command, a man matching his description had been seen loitering near a restricted area. The report was vague but enough to trigger an immediate response. Marcus felt a prickling unease as he approached the entrance, sensing eyes on him. He glanced around casually, but the men in uniform seemed ordinary at first until one of them stepped forward, his expression serious beneath the brim of his helmet. "Sir, I need you to stop," the soldier ordered, voice firm but measured. Marcus stopped, heart tightening. "Is there a problem?" "We received a report about suspicious activity in the area," the soldier said, eyes scanning Marcus carefully. Marcus blinked, confusion clouding his features. "I'm just here for coffee." The soldier nodded but didn't relax. More guards appeared, rifles slung over their shoulders, their stances tense. Marcus swallowed hard, the weight of their scrutiny settling on him like a physical force. "May I see some identification?" the lead guard requested. Marcus reached for his wallet, pulling out his badge and ID. "Special Agent Marcus Carter." The guards exchanged quick glances, their demeanor shifting but still wary. "We're just doing our job, sir," the soldier said, tone firm. "Please stay where you are while we verify." A small crowd had begun to gather across the street, watching the encounter unfold with quiet curiosity and unease. Marcus's mind raced. This wasn't a routine check. Something was off. He raised his hand slightly, signaling compliance, but the tension in the air was unmistakable. "Do you know why you were reported?" Marcus asked, voice steady but low. The soldier shook his head. "No, sir. But protocol requires we take every report seriously." Marcus nodded, though a flicker of frustration burned inside him. He glanced back at the coffee shop, the normalcy of the morning stark against the gravity of the moment. The guards radioed in, voices low and clipped. Minutes stretched, heavy with unspoken questions. Finally, the lead guard nodded and stepped back. "Thank you for your cooperation, sir. You're free to go." Marcus exhaled slowly, tension ebbing from his shoulders but not vanishing entirely. As he walked away, the eyes of the crowd followed him, whispers trailing in his wake. Suspicion lingered in the air, unseen, but unmistakable. The cold metal of the checkpoint gleamed under the harsh floodlights, casting long shadows on the asphalt. Marcus's breath hung in the frosty air, mingling with the tense silence that pressed down on the scene like a weight. The guards were spread out in a loose perimeter, their eyes scanning every movement with suspicion. They had been briefed only moments ago, with fragmentary details about a man approaching the compound who might be uncooperative. What they didn't know was that the man was Marcus' FBI director, father, and a man trying to navigate a minefield without setting it off. Marcus's hands were visible, open, and steady, as he approached the checkpoint. His ID was in his pocket, but he hadn't pulled it out yet. The moment needed care. "Stop right there," a guard barked, stepping forward with his rifle trained squarely on Marcus's chest. Marcus froze. The cold barrel pressed into his sternum, the man's finger twitching near the trigger. "I'm Marcus Lane," he said clearly, voice calm but firm. "Director of the FBI." The guard's eyes narrowed. "We don't have any clearance for you." Marcus's pulse quickened but he forced himself to stay steady. "Check your orders again." "I'm here to oversee the situation." "I'm authorized." A second guard circled behind Marcus, shadowing his every movement. Tension coiled tighter, the air thick with mistrust. Another guard radioed in, his voice clipped and anxious. "Subjects claiming to be FBI. Need verification before letting him through." Marcus raised his hands, palms forward, an unspoken plea to avoid escalation. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said. "Let me prove who I am." Minutes dragged by as the guards hesitated, caught between protocol and uncertainty. Their training urged caution, but the instinct to recognize authority was confused by incomplete information. Marcus could feel the heat rising in his chest, part frustration, part fear. This was his domain, yet he was treated as an outsider, a potential threat. Suddenly, a guard stepped forward, baton in hand, his expression hard. "You want us to believe you're FBI? Show us the badge," he demanded, voice sharp. Marcus slowly reached inside his jacket, pulling out his badge and ID. The metal gleamed under the harsh lights. The guards crowded around, eyes flicking between the credentials and Marcus himself. The weight of the moment hung heavy. "Clear him," the radio crackled. "But stay alert. We don't know what else he might be carrying." As the guards stepped aside, Marcus moved cautiously through the checkpoint, every step measured. Behind him, a convoy of vehicles rumbled into view. Reinforcements had arrived: local police, tactical units, and armored SUVs. The situation was escalating rapidly. Marcus stopped just inside the compound, turning to face the assembled officers. "Listen carefully," he said, voice carrying authority. "We're not here to escalate tensions. I'm here to oversee and ensure the situation is handled professionally and with respect." Several officers exchanged glances. Some nodded, others remained tense, hands hovering near weapons. The reinforcements fanned out, creating a wider perimeter. The mood grew more charged. Every shadow seemed a threat, every movement a potential trigger. Marcus could sense the fragile line between order and chaos. A sergeant approached, speaking quietly but firmly. "We've had reports of possible hostiles inside. Our priority is securing the area and protecting civilians." Marcus nodded. "Agreed. But remember, our goal is de-escalation. Use force only if absolutely necessary." As night deepened, the compound was bathed in an uneasy glow of flashing lights and whispered orders. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility crushing down. This was more than a security operation, it was a test of trust, leadership, and restraint. He glanced toward the horizon, where the first signs of dawn were faintly breaking. The lines were drawn. And the battle for peace, for truth, had only just begun. The fluorescent lights of the detention center flickered overhead, casting a sterile glow on the tense faces gathered in the small holding room. Marcus sat quietly, his posture calm but resolute, as two guards exchanged glances, their earlier hostility barely contained. The air was thick with unspoken judgment, a wall Marcus had been hitting since he arrived. Minutes earlier, one of the guards had been particularly aggressive. "Who do you think you are, coming in here with that attitude?" the taller guard sneered. "We don't take kindly to troublemakers." Marcus said nothing, his eyes steady. He knew the battle wasn't in words but in truth. When the shift supervisor finally arrived, the atmosphere shifted palpably. A brief exchange over the radio, then a nod. "The commander's identity has been confirmed," the supervisor announced, voice tight but respectful. "Marcus Reed. Delta Force." The words echoed around the room like a crack of thunder. The guards straightened, their earlier sneers replaced by a mixture of shock and reluctant respect. "Sir," the first guard stammered, stepping back. "We had no idea." Marcus nodded, the weight of the moment settling heavily. But the damage had already been done. As the door clicked shut behind the guards, Marcus leaned back against the cold metal bench, letting out a slow breath. His mind replayed the hours before, the dismissive stares, the whispered assumptions, the subtle but cutting words that lingered far longer than the guard's presence. Why tell them at all? Marcus wondered aloud to himself. Would it have changed anything? The answer was complicated. He remembered the look in the supervisor's eyes, the flicker of apology beneath the professional facade. But Marcus wasn't interested in apologies anymore. He had to decide whether to let this go or confront the injustice head-on. Later that evening, Marcus sat in his modest apartment, the city lights shimmering outside the window. His phone buzzed messages of support from former comrades, family, and friends who had watched the ordeal unfold. But Marcus's heart felt heavy. The fight wasn't just about his own dignity anymore. It was about breaking down the walls of prejudice and assumptions that ran deeper than any individual. He picked up the phone and called Amara, whose case had sparked the initial attention. "Amara, we've got to keep pushing," he said quietly. "This isn't just about me." Her voice was steady. "I'm with you. Every step of the way." The next day, Marcus requested a formal meeting with the detention center's administration. He presented a clear, measured account of the treatment he'd received. He didn't seek vengeance but demanded accountability. The administration, caught off guard by the Delta Force commander's calm yet unwavering stance, agreed to review the incident. They promised training sessions focused on bias and respect. But Marcus knew promises were easy. Change was harder. That evening, standing outside the detention center, Marcus looked up at the stars. He thought about the men and women who wore uniforms not just his own, but those who enforced the law daily. He wished for a future where respect wasn't a privilege earned by status, but a right given to all. The path ahead was uncertain. But Marcus was ready. The moment the video leaked online, Marcus's life fractured in a way he never expected. Within hours, hashtags trend, news outlets picked up the story, and social media exploded with opinions, some supportive, others viciously critical. Hashtag respect our veterans and hashtag justice for Marcus clashed with hashtag accountability now and hashtag military privilege. National commentators debated the incident endlessly, dissecting every frame of the footage. For Marcus, it was overwhelming. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages poured in from strangers and friends alike. Some sent words of encouragement. "Stay strong. We see you." Others accused him of stirring trouble. "Why bring this on yourself? Maybe you're not as honorable as you think." News anchors interviewed experts on military respect, racial profiling, and civil rights, framing Marcus's story as a flashpoint in larger systemic issues. Panels debated whether the officer's conduct was an isolated mistake or part of entrenched patterns of discrimination. The conversation spilled into communities across the country. Inside Marcus, the whirlwind was a storm of its own. Anger burned hot, a fierce flame sparked by betrayal. How could those sworn to protect and serve him, someone who had worn the uniform with pride, turn on him like this? At the same time, a deep isolation settled in. Friends who once called daily now hesitated. Family dinners grew quieter. The very people he wanted to lean on seemed unsure how to help. One night, Marcus sat alone in the dim light of his living room, staring at the endless stream of notifications on his phone. He scrolled through comments, some kind, many cruel. His mind raced with questions he had no answers for. Why had this happened? What did it mean for his future? The media frenzy brought pressure from all sides. Political leaders reached out with statements, some supportive, others distancing themselves. FBI agents probed for details, complicating his already fraught existence. And the officers involved remained silent, their side of the story emerging only in partial leaks, muddying the truth. Through it all, Marcus tried to hold on to what mattered. His sense of self. His family. His principles. But the weight of public scrutiny was relentless. In quiet moments, he grappled with conflicting emotions. Was his anger justified? Could he forgive the officers, the system, the society that allowed this to happen? Would he ever feel safe again? Friends urged him to speak out, to use this moment to push for change. He wanted to. But the fear of becoming just another headline, another statistic held him back. Still, beneath the turmoil, a flicker of resolve remained. Marcus knew that silence was not an option. Not now. The aftermath was messy. Complicated. Unpredictable. But it was only the beginning. Marcus stood on the stage in the crowded community hall, the weight of the microphone steady in his hand. The faces before him were familiar, a sea of supporters, skeptics, veterans, activists, and ordinary citizens all gathered to hear what he had to say. He cleared his throat and began. I fought on battlefields overseas, thinking I was protecting freedom and justice. But the fight doesn't end there. It's right here in our communities, within the very forces sworn to protect us. The room was silent. Marcus felt the energy shift. This was more than a speech. It was a call to action. Back when he enlisted, the military had been a refuge, a place of discipline, honor, and purpose. But now, with the National Guard called into police protests and the police force under fire for systemic bias, Marcus found himself at a crossroads. His public platform had grown since the incident involving his son Malik, and with it, a responsibility he hadn't anticipated. In private, the pressures were mounting. Friends and family praised his courage, but detractors were vocal, accusing him of betrayal, of airing dirty laundry in public. The very institutions he'd served seemed to turn against him. At night, Marcus wrestled with doubt. Was he doing the right thing? His advocacy work began in earnest as he connected with civil rights groups, military reform advocates, and former comrades who shared his concerns. Together, they drafted proposals for systemic reforms, better bias training, accountability mechanisms, and community engagement initiatives within law enforcement and the National Guard. One afternoon, Marcus met with Lieutenant Colonel Simmons, a longtime friend and mentor. Simmons, Marcus said, the system's broken. We can't keep pretending it's just a few bad actors. Simmons sighed. Change takes time, Marcus. But you're shaking things up. Be ready for pushback. The chapter explored Marcus's emotional growth, the balance between anger and hope, frustration and determination. He learned to lean on his support network while staying grounded in his principles. At a public forum, Marcus shared his story, his military service, his family's experience, and his vision for a just future. This fight isn't about tearing down institutions, he said. It's about rebuilding them to serve all people fairly and with respect. The crowd erupted in applause. Though the path was fraught with challenges, Marcus found strength in the fight beyond the battlefield, knowing that true courage meant standing up not just for country, but for justice at home. The conference room buzzed with a palpable energy, a mix of tension, hope, and determination. Marcus stood at the front, pointer in hand, as he navigated a detailed presentation projected onto the large screen behind him. Around the table sat military officials, lawmakers, and community leaders, each listening intently. This isn't just a policy change, Marcus began, his voice steady and clear. It's a fundamental shift in how we approach training, engagement, and accountability. Marcus's journey to this moment had been arduous. Years of witnessing the fallout from racial profiling, misunderstandings, and mistrust had forged a clear vision in his mind. Real change required cooperation at every level. He clicked the remote, and a slide appeared with stark statistics on incidents involving racial bias and use of force in military contexts. We're here to prevent what we've seen too many times: unnecessary confrontations rooted in bias and lack of cultural understanding, Marcus said. The reforms we propose are grounded in evidence-based practices and community input. The plan Marcus laid out had three key pillars. One, comprehensive training reform will implement mandatory training modules that emphasize cultural competency, implicit bias awareness, and de-escalation techniques, he explained. This isn't a one-time course, it's an ongoing process with regular assessments and updates. Colonel Simmons, a military training commander, nodded thoughtfully. Training is our foundation. If we can change the mindset early, we change behavior. To legislative support and oversight, Marcus turned to the lawmakers at the table. We need legislative backing to ensure accountability. This includes clear reporting requirements, independent oversight committees, and protections for whistleblowers. Representative Diaz leaned forward. We're committed to drafting bills that support these goals. It's vital that community voices are heard in this process. 3. Community engagement and partnership. Perhaps most importantly, Marcus continued, we must build trust through active dialogue with community leaders and organizations. Training must reflect the realities and concerns of the people we serve. Councilwoman Harper spoke next. It's about relationship building, not just policy. When communities feel heard, they are partners, not adversaries. Amid the discussion, Marcus watched the room shift from skepticism to cautious optimism. He knew the road ahead would be long, but this coalition was the first crucial step. Later, in a quieter moment, Marcus met privately with Malik, who had come from the community advocacy side. Your approach is smart, Malik said. You're not just targeting the symptoms, you're addressing the root causes. Marcus smiled. We have to. Otherwise, it's just the same cycle repeating. As weeks passed, Marcus coordinated with diverse stakeholders, military training officers, legislative aides, and grassroots leaders, ensuring the plan's details were shaped by collaboration. He oversaw pilot programs that introduced new training curricula, monitored feedback, and adjusted strategies in real time. At a community forum, Marcus stood alongside leaders and trainees, listening as residents shared their fears, hopes, and demands. One young woman's voice cut through the room, we want to feel safe, not just protected. Her words echoed Marcus's own vision. In his office late one night, Marcus reviewed progress reports and draft legislation. He paused, fingers steepled. Change was possible. But only if everyone held the same resolve. He leaned back, determination burning brighter than ever. We're ready, he whispered. The conference room felt colder than the summer afternoon outside. Marcus sat at the head of the long, polished table, the weight of the moment pressing down like a physical force. Across from him were the National Guard officials, stern-faced, arms folded, an unspoken wall of discipline and protocol. To his left sat a group of civil rights advocates, passionate, determined, their eyes blazing with a mixture of hope and frustration. The meeting had been called after weeks of protests, unrest, and public outcry over systemic injustices in the city's handling of civil rights and law enforcement. Marcus, a rising political figure and community leader, had insisted on being the bridge between these opposing worlds, determined to force change even if it meant standing alone. The air was thick with tension, as palpable as the stale coffee brewing in the corner. Colonel Daniels, the National Guard's commanding officer, broke the silence, his voice low and measured but laced with underlying defensiveness. We understand the concerns raised by the community, but let's be clear, our primary mission is to maintain order and protect lives. We operate within strict protocols, designed to prevent chaos. Marcus leaned forward, hands clasped tightly on the table. Order isn't maintained by ignoring the root causes of unrest, he said evenly. The community is angry because they've been ignored for decades. Systemic failures run deep, and it's time we stop sweeping them under the rug. The room bristled. One of the senior guardsmen shifted uneasily, his jaw tight. "We follow orders and laws," Daniels replied. "We're not here to police politics." The civil rights advocate, Maya, a sharp woman with piercing eyes, spoke up next. "Following orders doesn't excuse turning a blind eye to abuses. We need accountability at every level: military, police, and government. People are tired of empty promises." Marcus nodded in agreement. "Exactly. We need reform that's more than surface deep. We need transparency, oversight, and community involvement in decision-making." Colonel Daniels exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. "Change takes time," he said. "We can't dismantle decades of institutional practice overnight." Marcus's voice hardened, but he kept his composure. "Time has run out. People are suffering now. They want change now." The conversation escalated, voices rising, passions flaring. But amid the heated exchanges, a grudging willingness to listen began to emerge. The advocates shared detailed proposals for community oversight boards, better training for guardsmen on civil rights, and systems for reporting misconduct without fear of reprisal. Marcus pushed hard, demanding commitment, not just promises. Finally, after hours of discussion, Colonel Daniels leaned back and nodded slowly. "We'll pilot some of these reforms. It's a start." Marcus allowed himself a small, cautious smile. "This is the first step. We'll hold you accountable." As the meeting adjourned, the atmosphere had shifted. The confrontation hadn't resolved all conflicts, but it had cracked open the door for meaningful dialogue and change. Outside, the city's streets buzzed with uncertainty and hope, and Marcus knew the hardest work was still ahead. But for the first time in a long time, there was a real chance for transformation. The early morning air was crisp and still as Marcus stood at the edge of the parade ground, watching the sun rise over the distant mountains. The familiar clang of boots hitting pavement echoed behind him as soldiers marched in formation, their discipline precise, their faces determined. But for Marcus, something inside had shifted, something that had taken years to crystallize. He was no longer just a warrior. For as long as he could remember, Marcus had lived by the code of the soldier: duty, loyalty, strength. He had been proud to serve, to protect the nation from threats both external and internal. Yet, the battles he'd fought had shown him more than enemy lines. They revealed fractures within the country itself, gaps between the military and the people they swore to defend. It had been a painful awakening. The turning point came months ago, during an incident at a small town where military and civilians clashed. Marcus saw firsthand the fear, the misunderstanding, and the anger simmering beneath the surface. The soldiers weren't just protectors; sometimes, unintentionally, they became barriers. Walls built from mistrust and fear. That moment forced Marcus to reconsider everything. Back at headquarters, the atmosphere was tense. Commanders debated the future direction of the forces, grappling with rising criticism from civilian groups and international observers alike. Marcus listened quietly, aware that change was necessary but also difficult. He took it upon himself to become a bridge, an advocate for a new mission that went beyond the battlefield. The first step was the implementation of new policies aimed at fostering respect and collaboration between the military and civilian communities. Marcus helped draft initiatives focused on transparency, accountability, and cultural sensitivity training for soldiers. He worked with local leaders to create forums where voices could be heard on both sides. The process wasn't easy. Some officers resisted, clinging to old ways. Some civilians remained skeptical, their wounds too fresh to trust quickly. But Marcus believed in persistence. One afternoon, Marcus visited a community center in the heart of a city that had seen conflict and division. The room was filled with residents young and old, veterans and families gathered for a dialogue he had helped organize. At the front, a banner read, "Building Bridges, Together for Peace." Marcus took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I know there have been hard times," he began, voice steady but honest. "And I understand why many of you may fear or doubt the military. But I'm here to listen and to learn." For the next hour, stories poured out, stories of loss, resilience, hope, and the desire for understanding. Marcus didn't respond with orders or commands. Instead, he offered empathy and a promise that the military would not only protect the nation's borders but also honor and protect its people's rights and dignity. His transformation from warrior to advocate inspired others within the ranks. Soldiers began volunteering for community projects, helping rebuild schools and infrastructure damaged in conflicts. Training programs included lessons on human rights and cultural awareness. Slowly, the military's image began to change from that of an occupying force to that of a partner. At home, Marcus's own family saw the change most clearly. His wife, Sarah, who had worried about the emotional toll of his service, now witnessed a man renewed, not hardened by war, but softened by purpose. "Your mission has evolved," she said one evening, watching him prepare for another community meeting. "You're protecting something even greater than the battlefield." Marcus smiled. "It's about protecting our country's soul." As months passed, the government officially adopted the new policies Marcus had helped champion. A symbolic ceremony marked the occasion, with military leaders, government officials, and community representatives gathered under a clear sky. Marcus spoke again, this time with a quiet authority born of experience. "Our strength isn't just in weapons or strategy. It's in our ability to unite, to understand, to respect. This mission to protect both our country and its people is the true path forward." Applause rippled through the crowd, genuine and hopeful. Walking away from the ceremony, Marcus felt a lightness he hadn't known in years. The fight was far from over, but now it was different. It was a fight for hearts and minds, for trust and connection. A new mission. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus stood with a group of young recruits, sharing his story not of battles won or enemies defeated, but of the power of change. "Remember," he told them, "the greatest victory is when you protect not just the land, but the people who call it home." And in their eyes, he saw the future, one where warriors could become advocates, where conflict could give way to cooperation, and where hope could rise from the ashes of struggle. The first rays of dawn spilled through the window of Marcus's home office, casting long shadows over the neat stacks of papers and folders that had accumulated on his desk. He sat quietly, staring at the framed photo of his family that smiled back at him, Tasha, Anya, and Elijah, their faces alive with hope and promise. For years, Marcus had lived two lives, one as a soldier sworn to protect his country, and another as a father and husband fighting to protect his family. The battlefields overseas and the struggles at home had often felt worlds apart, disconnected chapters in a complex story. But now, more than ever, those worlds were converging into a new purpose, a new mission that embraced both. The transformation had not been sudden. It was the culmination of months of reflection, difficult conversations, and a deepening understanding of what it truly meant to serve not just a country, but its people. Marcus's journey from warrior to advocate had begun quietly. The hospital's fight for justice had stirred something inside him. Seeing the pain and resilience of his wife and children, and witnessing the systemic challenges in healthcare and society, he realized that protecting the country extended beyond the battlefield. It meant fostering healing, building bridges, and standing up for the vulnerable, whether on foreign soil or in his own community. As a veteran, Marcus was uniquely positioned to become a voice for change. The military and civilian worlds often seemed divided, mistrustful, and distant. Many veterans struggled with reintegration, feeling isolated from the very people they had sworn to defend. Marcus saw an opportunity to change that narrative. With Tasha's unwavering support, he began reaching out to local leaders, veterans organizations, and community groups. Together, they launched an initiative aimed at creating dialogue, understanding, and partnership between the military and the civilian population. The initiative, called Bridges of Service, held its first community forum in the very hospital that had become a symbol of transformation for Tasha's family. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation as veterans, healthcare workers, city officials, and citizens gathered to listen, learn, and share. Marcus took the stage, his presence calm but commanding. He spoke not as a soldier delivering orders, but as a man who had walked through fire and emerged with a new mission. "Our service doesn't end when we take off the uniform," he said. "It continues in how we care for one another, how we build understanding between communities, and how we ensure that no one feels invisible or unheard." His words resonated deeply. Veterans shared stories of struggle and resilience, while civilians expressed their gratitude and curiosity. The walls that once divided them began to crumble. Behind the scenes, the hospital's leadership had embraced the spirit of this initiative. Inspired by Tasha's advocacy and Marcus's vision, they fast-tracked the implementation of new policies aimed at supporting veterans and their families. A dedicated Veterans Liaison Office was established, staffed by trained professionals who understood the unique challenges faced by service members returning to civilian life. Mental health resources, job training programs, and family support services were expanded and made more accessible. Marcus was invited to serve as an advisor on the hospital's Veteran Support Committee, a role he accepted with humility and determination. It was a new way of serving, one that allowed him to use his experiences to improve the lives of others. At home, this new mission breathed fresh energy into their family life. Marcus's conversations with Tasha deepened, grounded in shared purpose and hope. Their children watched as their father became a leader not through force, but through compassion and vision. One evening, as Marcus and Tasha sat on the porch, watching the stars blink to life in the darkening sky, Marcus shared his thoughts. "I used to think protecting people meant being ready to fight," he said quietly. "But now I see it's just as much about protecting their dignity, their futures. About building a community that cares." Tasha smiled, her hand finding his. "You're doing that. We're all doing it together." The community began to feel the ripple effects. Local schools invited veterans to share their stories, helping young people understand the sacrifices and realities of military service. Hospitals and clinics across the city adopted similar veteran support policies, inspired by the hospital's pioneering example. Bridges of Service became a model for cooperation and healing, bridging gaps that had long seemed insurmountable. At a City Hall event, Marcus stood alongside Tasha and community leaders as they announced a new public-private partnership focused on veteran employment and education. The applause was heartfelt, a testament to the hard work and unity behind the initiative. Looking out at the crowd, Marcus felt a profound sense of purpose. This was more than a mission, it was a movement, growing stronger every day. The story of Marcus and Tasha had come full circle. From the depths of hardship and injustice, they had risen, transformed by love, resilience, and the unwavering belief in a better future. Their journey was a powerful reminder that true service meant fighting not just with weapons, but with compassion, not just for country, but for community. As the sun set over the city, casting a warm glow on the faces of those gathered for a final ceremony at the hospital's healing garden, Marcus spoke one last time. "Our mission is clear," he said. "To protect and serve our families, our neighbors, our nation, not through division, but through understanding. This is our promise, and our future." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, the sound echoing through the night like a beacon of hope. A new mission. A new beginning. Marcus, Tasha, and their family stood united, ready to face whatever lay ahead, stronger, wiser, and more committed than ever to the fight for justice, dignity, and peace.